Hey guys, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and it is Sunday, and we are doing Breaches of the Week. Now, I'd like to thank a couple of different people, Chris Fallon, Rebecca Rutherford, Deepak Gupta, Neville Goidels, and a couple of others. Guys, as always, thank you very much. And if you have a tip for me, please feel free to send it in. I am more than happy to take it and give you a shout out as well. And moving on, we are going to be talking about our very first data breach today, and that would be my own data breach. Now, it's not a conventional data breach, but I think I found this really interesting, or I did find this really interesting. I don't think I did. I started getting some requests last night to basically understand if I was the Nick Espinoza that went ahead and glitter bombed President Trump at a presidential rally, or one of his rallies rather, a couple of days ago. Interestingly enough, there is an activist in Minnesota who became famous for glitter bombing Newt Gingrich years ago, and I believe he was also part of the Occupy movement, and he went ahead and glitter bombed Donald Trump and at a rally, I believe it was last Thursday, and he's been posting about how the Secret Service has been trying to talk to him. And so by virtue of that, I have been getting requests, because if you Google my name, a lot of my stuff comes up, and right under all of the articles in Google that show up is my picture and my Facebook profile that you might be watching me on. So there you go. That has been a rather interesting time, and I did post on that to say I am not that Nick Espinoza, and if that Nick Espinoza is watching, I think you really do need to talk to the Secret Service and get this cleared up. Hopefully it'll be harmless for you, and all of that. But I can understand why they would want to talk to you about that. So heads up. Now, moving on into actual data breaches, we're going to talk about Wood Ranch Medical. They are a medical provider in Simi Valley, California. They had a ransomware attack recently, and they are closing. By virtue of their attack, it has done such damage to their reputation, their organization, their finances, etc. They are actually closing the doors on their business. That is the power, unfortunately, of the ransomware, and why we need to take things like backups and disaster recovery plans and contingency plans a whole lot more serious, because these things affect everybody. Moving on, we're going to be talking about TransUnion Canada. Now, if you recall, TransUnion here in the United States is one of the three big credit bureau providers, and you know where I'm going with this, and I quote, "An unauthorized person was able to gain access to a TransUnion Canada web portal and use it to pull consumer credit files. This was done by using credentials stolen from a TransUnion customer who had access to the portal." And so heads up, TransUnion has been notifying all of you guys. I believe they've closed that loop, but basically credit file lookups were between June 28th and July 11th of this year. So heads up, if you are in TransUnion Canada, and if you are Canadian, you're in TransUnion Canada. This is how the credit bureaus work. Moving on, we're talking about a company called Volusion. Now, they are a provider of cloud-hosted online stores. You know where I'm going with this. Hackers have breached that infrastructure and basically have been delivering malicious code that records and steals payment card details entered on users in online forms. So basically 6,500 stores were impacted, and it looks like the number is going to be even higher than that. That is a major supply chain hack. Volusion has more than 20,000 customers. So the most notable one that was compromised by virtue of this is Sesame Street. That's right, the children's show. Is the Sesame Street online store, which basically had to be taken down after it was discovered, and so hopefully that's in the process of being fixed, or has been fixed already. Moving on, we're looking at Freedom Healthcare staffing out of Colorado. Now, a researcher basically found a database which contained 957,000 records from Freedom Healthcare staffing. It included the quote-unquote intimate details on employees, various internal communications, job seeker and recruiter data, IP addresses, ports, pathways, storage data, and a whole bunch more that basically cyber criminals could exploit and get even deeper into the network. So the database was set to be publicly accessible, so pretty much anyone could edit, download, or delete data without administrative credentials. That's a serious issue. So if you have anything to do with Freedom Healthcare staffing in Aurora, Colorado, heads up. Moving on, let's talk about Methodist Hospitals from Gary, Indiana. They disclosed HIPAA violation. 68,039 individuals may have been exposed following a successful phishing attack against 2 of its employees. And so basically, they said, and I quote, in June 2019, Methodist learned of unusual activity in an employee's email account. We immediately commenced an investigation, working with third-party forensics, and basically they figured this out. On August 7th, 2019, it was determined that Methodist employees fell victim to an email phishing scam that allowed an unauthorized actor to gain access. So heads up, if you use Methodist hospitals in Northwest Indiana, Gary, Indiana. Moving on, we're going to be talking about hookers.nl, and that is exactly how it sounds. This is a Dutch prostitution site. Prostitution is legal, in the Netherlands, and so here we are. Now, according to Dutch news, basically a hacker was able to get into this and started selling information for $300. Now, this database included usernames, hashed passwords, IP addresses for about 250,000 members. Now, basically, what this is coming from is the old vBulletin remote code execution that is getting a lot of bulletin boards for websites in trouble. Last week, I talked about XKCD, which has a rather large following, and it's been around for years. They were impacted by this. Moving on, Click to Mail. We're talking about Click to Mail. They said that they're basically alerting customers of a data breach that may have exposed their personal data. They discovered this breach after some customer usernames and email addresses were found being abused in spam messages. Names, organization names, account mailing addresses, email addresses, and phone numbers may have been compromised in this cyber attack. And so heads up if you use Click to Mail. Moving on, we're talking about a company called Beeline. Now, this is a Russian internet service provider. The data of 8.7 million of their customers is being sold and shared online. Now, this information contains personal details such as full names, addresses, mobile and home phone numbers as well. Now, the ISP said that the data only includes details on Russian customers who signed up for home broadband connections before November of 2016. So if you are in Russia and you have been a long-term member of Beeline, heads up to you, your internet service provider got you compromised. Moving on, let's talk about the entire country of Brazil. Personal information, including names, dates of birth, taxpayer IDs of 92 million Brazilians is being advertised for sale on the dark web, and it is probably one of the biggest government data breaches in known history. Now, the seller, who is only known as X4Crow, claims that they have the records for nearly like I said, 92 million out of the 209 million citizens, which is potentially the entire country's working population. Now, X4Crow is basically promoting this as an auction, and it's starting at $15,000 US. So basically, they're auctioning off this entire set to other people in the dark web for 15 grand, and basically it's in increments of $1,000 in bidding. So heads up, Brazil, basically your entire working population looks like it just got exposed and your data is being auctioned off. Moving on, let's talk about Annex Cloud. Now, Annex Cloud is basically, they just warned one of their customers who happens to be Steinmart, which is a major retail outlet or shopping store, I guess, in the United States. I think I've been in there exactly once. I can't remember what they do, but they're huge. I see them in a lot of cities. They're basically warning Steinmart of potential time periods when data entered by their customers during the checkout process, because that's what Annex does for Steinmart and a whole bunch of other companies. And so in an email sent by Steinmart, the company was urging customers who placed or attempted to place orders on their website on May 19th, June 1st, June 5th, July 8th, and July 9th to check their credit card statements, make sure they're okay. So heads up if you shop at Steinmart. As soon as I hear anything else about Annex Cloud, I'll let you guys know. Moving on, we're talking about PAL or PAL Airlines. This is an airline based out of St. John's, New Brunswick in Canada. They've just launched an investigation into their own security incident. Now, the airline basically said it looks like it's being limited to one email account, so it's a phishing attack, and contains information on company's employee pass travel program. So the information has names, dates of birth, and credit card information. So heads up, if you have anything to do with PAL or PAL Airlines out of New Brunswick, you may be affected. Moving on, let's talk about Compass Health. Now, this is another New Zealand medical organization that was hit. I reported on one last week where they had a handful of hospitals that they run and control in medical centers across New Zealand get hit. We've got another one. Now, this was formerly known as the Greater Wellington Health Trust, for those of you in New Zealand that are watching this, and they provide healthcare, obviously. And so we are looking at capital PHO, Tumai Mo Te Iwi, Kapiti PHO, and Wairarapa PHO may have been affected by virtue of this. These are all basically organizations under their umbrella now. So heads up to you, New Zealand. It looks like your medical system is under attack. Moving on, we're going to be talking about something called Leafly. Now, this is one of the largest cannabis websites in the world. They just revealed that they got a data breach as well that affected some of their customers. Leafly said in an email that on September 30th, and I quote, a set of Leafly user records dated July 2, 2016, held in a secondary Leafly database was disclosed without permission. Now, Leafly is saying that in this notice that the user's email and username that was created and encrypted were included in these records. And I quote, Leafly does not collect credit card information or national identification numbers. So if you're a user of Leafly, heads up, you may want to change your password. Moving on, we're going to be talking about the Philadelphia Department of Public Health. Now, basically, they have a public data tool that they use to track the prevalence of hepatitis infections. And you know where I'm going with this. Left individuals' health records completely accessible, compromising names, social security numbers, and intimate health records of thousands of people receiving care in Philadelphia. The department learned of this breach on Friday when an Philadelphia Inquirer reporter discovered the data and notified the department. It was not clear how long this information was exposed, and the data was taken down when they learned of this from that reporter. So if you have anything to do with the Philadelphia Department of Public Health and have hepatitis, you have hepatitis. 2, they may have gotten you exposed in another way. And finally, we have to talk about the breach of the week, which is Twitter. Now, I actually did a video on this a couple of days ago, but it really deserves to be here as well, because while it's technically not a malicious hacker going ahead and data breaching you, Twitter itself actually did kind of get you breached. And here's why. If you have signed up for Twitter and have a Twitter account, of which something like 500 million to a billion of us do, millions of us use and enable multi-factor authentication. I highly recommend using multi-factor authentication as it prevents a lot of different types of hijacking and takeovers of user accounts. Now, there's a couple of different ways to do this, and the one I'm speaking about, or the two methods I'm speaking about of enabling multi-factor or two-factor authentication is through email and through phones. Now, typically when you are doing this, these organizations are not supposed to be using your phone number or your email for anything except to validate your account when you log in, and that is not what happened. Twitter discovered that basically their phone numbers that they had for multi-factor authentication was being used by people that were marketing for advertisement. In other words, they were giving the phone numbers and email addresses of multi-factor authentication systems of their users to advertisers, and that is a huge breach of trust that actually makes my job significantly harder, in the sense that I am always on stage, I am always on camera or whatever, pushing multi-factor authentication. And if you are doing this and then finding out, well, they're data mining me, a lot of people are going to be less likely to want to use multi-factor authentication because they're going to think everybody does this. That's a serious problem in the cybersecurity community because we need multi-factor authentication. It's not a perfect system, but it's way better than having a standard username and password. And so if you're going to do that, I highly recommend going and getting an authenticator app. If you have a business or you're in part of a company, hopefully they've got a good identity management system that actually supplies you with multi-factor authentication as well as an authenticator app or a hardware token. But if you don't, there are some free options that you can go and download an app on iPhone or Android. The one I usually recommend is Authy, A-U-T-H-Y, and there are plenty of others. So I'm not sitting here poo-pooing any of the others, but that's just the one I think is pretty solid. You can also buy hardware tokens, and all of that plug into your computer. And so in other words, you can't log in if that's not plugged in. That that kind of thing. But that is a very serious breach of trust. It's a very serious breach of confidence. And I hope that Twitter is going to learn their lesson, apologize for that, and ensure that doesn't happen again. And if you are running a website that has multi-factor authentication with, where you're taking phone numbers and email addresses for that fact, please do not sell that information. You are literally harming people because people will be turned off to multi-factor authentication. And so those are your breaches of the week. Were you affected? I literally was this week. And here we are. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe and stay online. Thanks, guys.